Okay, 2001 SLK 320, and I'm going to be doing the upper control arm and ball joint and the lower ball joint today. Just replaced the tires. There was some cupping on them, which generally means that you've got a bit of a loose suspension problem. I know the tie rods aren't bad. Ball joints, tiny bit of wear. So might as well do them. I've got them. They're not super expensive. Ball joints are like 30 bucks for lowers, and upper control arms are like 75 bucks. And so, you know, both sides you're talking $200 and a bit of time. This takes about an hour per side. So on the SLK, the battery's in the front, and in order to get to the upper mount, you can see the bolt there for the upper control arm mount, and the other one's back under there. So I'm going to have to remove the battery. And on any Mercedes, when you have to remove the battery, key out of the ignition, never have the key in the ignition when you put the battery back in, never have the key in the ignition when you take it out. Key always out of the ignition. So unlock your doors, put your windows down so you don't lock yourself out. And negative battery first. Extremely ridiculous important. If you don't remember anything else, remember negative battery cable first. Unhook that, and unhook the positive, take the ground strap off, pull the battery out, and we can get to that upper mount. And of course, then I'm going to jack up the car, take the wheel off, and we'll go from there. Okay, wheel off. Jack is still under the jack pad. Jack stand under the lower control arm, but not holding the lower control arm. The jack is still holding that. The jack stand is there in case something fails. Nice. I just pulled the car to the winter storage yesterday, and the rust is still wearing off of the rotor. But anyway, upper control arm bolt, depending on whether yours has ever been changed before, it could be a 17, an 18, a 15. More than likely it's going to be a 17, and I'm just sprayed some, it's not on there, too tight. So I'm going to turn it and see if the inner nut is moving with it. Thank God it's not. And I'm going to loosen this, I'm going to loosen this all the way. You want to take it all the way off before you break the taper, or else you'll never get the nut off. So take the nut all the way off while it's still tightly in here, and then put it back on a couple threads to hold it there, and then we'll break the taper. So I'm going to take this all the way off, basically, like I said, to clean the threads, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, sorry, camera's a little wobbly. So I've got the nut off. I'm going to put the nut on a couple more threads. Just hand tighten it on there. And then you vibrate to break the taper. A lot of times if you hit from both sides at the same time. And then a lot of times not. So. Wow, that's in there good. Wow. That one's really in there. Well, you don't want to see me banging on that for 10 minutes, but that's what it's going to do. I'm going to have to vibrate that with the hammer until it comes out. So I'll keep popping and vibrating on that until it pops out. Back in a minute. Okay, so after about 5 or 7 whacks after I turned the camera off, it came off. And you can see that joint even the boot is torn back here. That thing is gone. It's kind of rocking around in there. The upper's good, but these ball joints aren't replaceable, so you have to replace the entire arm with it. So that's off, and we're going to move to the, we're going to finish the upper first, actually. So I'm going to go to remove the battery, which I haven't done yet, and back to you in a minute. Okay, battery out. Here's the battery tray, and I'm going to, this isn't necessary, but I'm going to pull the battery tray out to repaint it because it's a little rusty. And I don't like that. So just bend the two side arms in a little bit and pull it up and out. And yeah, I'm going to repaint that before I get to anything else, or before I finish. There's that second bolt. Again, rusty, so I'm going to clean up under here and be back in a minute. Okay, so it's all cleaned out. I repainted I don't know where I even put it. I think I put it in my trailer. The battery tray. And now this electrical box, you don't want to take this out. This has got the transmission computer, the ECU, all that stuff in there. And the bolt is right down in there. It's straight down from my finger. This is what I'm using to reach it. I'm using a long extension. This is like a 10-inch extension, a swivel, and a 5/8 or 16 millimeter, one of the two. They're both the same, 5/8 and 16 millimeter, or are the same. So I'm going to be using that. And then on the front bolt, right here in front of the coolant bottle, that's a 15 millimeter. So you just hold that one, unbolt with this one. You can unscrew the either end that you want. And then slide the bolt out. The bolt's going to come out past the coolant bottle. Hopefully it can fit past. If not, I'm going to have to take these 10 millimeter nuts off and move the coolant bottle. Actually, I don't think it's going to slide past it. I'm going to have to move the coolant bottle, the overflow bottle. So I'm going to have to take these 10 mil, 1, 2, I think there's a third one somewhere, isn't there? I think there is. I can't remember if there's a third one. I haven't had one of these coolant bottles out yet. So anyway, I'll take these two 10 mils out and let you know in a second. Okay, on the coolant bottle, it's two 10 millimeter nuts, one there, and then pull straight up. There's a little foot on the bottom of the bottle, right there, that pops into a rubber bung. It just pops into that rubber thingy down there. I'm gonna clean up down there while I'm in there too. But anyway, we're gonna move that to get access to slipping that bolt out. You don't have to remove the whole bottle, just move it aside so you can get access to that bolt coming out right there. It's like 6 inches, 8 inches long, so it needs to slide out quite a bit. So now that I've got that out of the way, I'm going to loosen that bolt, pull it out, and back in a second. Okay, so I'm just finishing taking this upper bolt out. Okay, the nut is now off. Sorry, I'm sliding the coolant bottle right into your view. And that is the bolt. See, nice and long. See, there is thread. I don't know why there's thread locker on the middle. That seems to make no sense because there's no threads in the middle of the control arm. Thread locker, yes, on the end. But I don't get the thread locker on the middle. Everyone I see has got thread. I think it just comes that way from the factory with this thread locker coating on it. But there'd be no reason to have it in the middle because there's nothing threaded. And the nut, there it is. That's the backside nut for that. So now we can just go underneath and pull the old control arm out. Careful of the ABS sensor wires and the brake sensor wires. Oh crap, this one does have crap. Okay, if like me you have xenon headlights, I forgot all about the little mount there. There's a little bolt on there right in front of my finger. You can see that little bolt on an arm, and that's the auto aim for the xenon headlights. So I've got to remove that little bolt. I think it's an 8 mil. I completely forgot about that. Anyway, I gotta pull that off and I'll be back in a minute. I hope my new arm has the xenon sensor bolt thingy. Back in a minute. Okay, so this is the inside of the control arm. See this little 8mm bolt here? That's what mounts the little rotating arm, and it just tells the xenon headlights. So xenon headlights have to be auto-aimed. That's why aftermarket xenon is illegal, because the two things that allow you to have xenon are auto-aiming headlights, which is what this controls. When it goes up and down, it tells that little potentiometer to move the headlights up and down relative to the weight of the car, and headlight washers. Because xenon headlights do not heat up like a regular headlight does, so it doesn't melt ice, doesn't melt snow and crap away. So in order for xenon to be legal, any car that came from the factory with xenon headlamps will have an automatic headlamp adjuster that adjusts the headlamps up and down, and headlamp washers. So that's why aftermarket, if you ever see aftermarket kits and it'll say for off-road use only, and you're going, why the hell can't I put xenon headlights on? That's why, so they don't blind people, and so that they can keep snow and ice clear in areas where there's snow and ice. But anyway, 8mm bolt, I'm going to pull that off and be back in a minute. Okay, that's actually a 10mm bolt. So you've got the nut that goes through and the little locator pin there, and those correspond on the new arm. See, there's two little holes. The bolt goes through one, the locator pin goes through the other, and then you bolt it up with the 10mm bolt on the back side. So you'll basically put the arm in and then bolt it up. So I'm going to bolt that back on, that little sensor back on. So I'll show you how it works real quick, if I can. You see it's a little arm. Oops. Oh, helps if I zoom out. Little arm that moves up and down. And that's it. And it tells this little sensor how high your suspension is. So anyway, I'm gonna bolt that back on and then slide the, I don't know if I can slide the lower control arm in first or not. So, or upper control arm in first or not. So I'll pop that in and see how it goes. Hold on a second. Okay, so I can bolt that on after the arm is in. So I'm gonna get this out of the way, and then you can reach into the underneath and try and move the arm so you can see where it lines up with this hole. So the hole in the arm is going to line up with that. Reaching in, where is it? Okay. Get the bolt started so it's holding it in place. Just get it in an inch or so. That'll keep it from moving out of the way. Bottle out of the way. Now I've got in most of the way. I'm going to go underneath. I'll just leave this camera running. I'm going to go underneath and tap on the other end just to get it firmed up and straighten them out. The new ones are a little bit tight going into, it's like they've got to go in between the suspension mount here, and they're a little bit tight, so you kind of have to tap them so they go in straight. So I'm going to tap that from the bottom. So that's mostly lined up now. On the other side, I can just pop this through, and then you just have to wiggle it around until it pops out the other side. But you don't want me wiggle it. Watch me wiggle this bolt until it goes out the other side. I'll wiggle that around. I'll attach that. Show you this. Now this nut, this bolt goes in through the hole there. Yeah. Where am I? Sorry. Goes in through the hole with the locator pin, and then you just put the nut on in the back, and that'll, as it goes up and down, move that potentiometer. So we're just trying to line up the back bolt where the bolt comes out, and then I'll put the nut on there, and then we won't tighten anything down. The upper nut we don't tighten down yet. That gets tightened once the suspension is back on the ground. So I'm going to put that through, put the back nut on, but not tight, just to hold the bolt in place. Bolt this 10mm sensor bolt back on, and be back in a few minutes. Just want to make sure that pin is lined up in its hole. Okay. And then just a matter of tightening it down. So back in a minute. Okay, so the bolt is through. You can see the bolt down there. I put the coolant bottle back on, cleaned underneath it, put the coolant bottle back on, because I don't need that off. I'm not pulling that bolt out anymore. I'm just going to be holding it in place, and I have plenty of room there as it is. The nut is on the back. Not tightened, it's just sitting there so it doesn't slide out. Sensor is bolted on for the xenon headlights. We can take this cap off. That's just to protect the boot during shipment. Put the nut back on, and we're going to be using that upper control arm to hold stuff in place in a few minutes. But for right now, we're going to go to the lower ball joint. And these can be done without, lower ball joints can be done without taking the upper arm off. But while the upper arm is off, it makes it easier to access the nut. For the lower ball joint, which is, the ball joint nut itself is on top, and then the mount nut is on the back. This is a 22. This one is a not a 22, I think it's a 21 on the back one. It could be different if you've used an aftermarket, if there's an aftermarket ball joint on there at some time. So I'm going to loosen those two, and then support the suspension so that the brake disc doesn't come off. You can remove the caliper and rotor and everything to make it lighter and easier. I'm a little too lazy to do that. I can work around it. So you just want to make sure you don't break any wires or anything. So actually I'm going to loosen the two sensor wires out of their clips so they have more room to move around freely, just in case anything falls or anything, which it shouldn't if you're careful. Anyway, loosen those two, and back in a minute. Top one's 22, and the bottom one is actually I'll show you the ball joint so you can see. I'm using Mevotech parts because it's a Canadian company. They have really good warranty service. They'll replace anything that doesn't work. They're like an hour down the road from me. So this is the lower ball joint. This is the mount with the locator pin that goes into the control arm, or the steering knuckle. And this is the ball joint on top with this little protective boot on it. And I think this one has both 22s on them. And when these are tightened, these are going to be retightened to with Loctite on them. Even though these are locking nuts, I'm still going to use Loctite. These will be retightened to 75 to 80 foot-pounds. So I'm going to take, this is the top one, that's the back one. I'm going to loosen those, and then back to the hammering to pop the tapers out. So back in a second. Okay, we're looking at the upper bolt here, or upper nut. And this one just, the whole ball joint was spinning with the nut. I could not get the nut off. I'm having to cut it off with a grinder. There is I think it's a 6mm Allen key that you can use to hold the tie rod end. It's like a little hole in the end there, and there is one. And you're supposed to stick a 6mm Allen key in there and hold that, and it never ever works. It'll never hold the 100 foot-pounds of torque that you're cranking on to get this bolt off. It just doesn't work. It never works. I did lube it, pre-lube it with penetrating oil. Doesn't work. I'm just cutting the nut off. The ball joint's going anyway, so as long as I'm careful not to touch the arm. Obviously you can see there that I've touched the arm the tiniest little bit with the grinding wheel, but I'm just going to grind and cut that whole bolt off and tap it out. And the bottom one is out. Anyway, I'm going to put, once it's ready to fall out, I'm going to put the upper arm onto the upper ball joint and put the bolt in there to hold this whole arm up so it doesn't fall down. So that's once I'm going to pop that out. I'm going to do that. So I'm just going to finish grinding this and get that bolt off. Sometimes this happens. It happens a lot, actually, when you're doing ball joints and suspension parts. They get old and rusted, and this rust is from only 2 winters in Canada that this car was ever driven, from 2001. This rust on the shock and stuff. This car was driven by the previous owner, the original owner, for 2 winters, and then never winter driven again. But the rust and salt are evident. So anyway, I'm going to be doing shocks this year too. But yeah, I'm going to cut that off, and I'll be back once I get that off and the whole lower ball joint assembly out, and we'll install it again. We'll show you how to install the new one. Back in a second. Okay, so I put the nut on the upper ball joint to hold the entire arm in place while I took the lower ball joint, where'd it go, off. And this took a lot of pounding to get this sucker out, as you can see, and a bit of grinding. It was in there good. They are usually in there really, really good. And the lower ball joint's actually not that bad. So it was the upper that was causing everything, but if you're going to change the lower's $30, might as well change it. So when you reinstall this, oh sorry, one more thing. I think I've showed it on my W202 and 208 playlist. On the back of the brake backing shield, there's a little bump that keeps this ball joint from pulling out this way. And unless you want to take the brake caliper off, take the backing plate off, take everything apart to pull this off, all you really have to do is tap in and bend this little hump in, and then you can pull it out. If not, pull everything else off. Go for it, fill your boots, pull the whole thing off if you want. If not, tap that little bump in. It hurts nothing, it affects nothing. It's just there to keep the ball joint, I guess, from popping out on its own, the lower mounting point. So when we reinstall, where's the new one? Where do I have the new one? The new one, we're gonna put the upper in first. Very important, because you won't be able to do it the other way. The locator pin is on the bottom one that goes in the back. So you're going to pull this boot cover off and the bolt. And you're going to put the upper in first and lightly put the bolt on. You're not going to crank it on, just put it on to hold it in place. And then we'll, oh, I'm running out of camera battery. And then we'll pop the back one in, and I'll come back, and the bottom one goes in afterwards. And it's just a little tricky to align the little locator pin hole in with the arm. There's a little hole in the bottom of the arm there that goes into. If you find it hard to locate, just take a file and file this kind of into a point at the end, so it will help guide it into the hole a little easier. Won't hurt anything. This is just a locator pin. Once the end goes in, it'll pull the rest in. So if you file this a little bit rounded on the end, it'll be easier to pull it in. And again, my battery's dying a bit, so I will put that ball joint in and then come back to tighten it up. Okay, so here I'm just putting the ball joint on the upper mount here first. So you put it on the upper mount, put the nut on, or else you won't be able to slide it under once you're done. And it's just sitting here loose. I'm gonna put take the bottom bolt off. Hopefully I don't run out of camera battery. Point in that direction, and I'm just going to lift this up, put it on here. It's a bit of a wiggle. You have to lift it up and get it in there, and put the bolt on, start tightening it toward it, and obviously aim the pin toward the hole. And it's a little bit of a pain in the butt, but it's like 5 minutes of work. Good workout.
good workout for the upper body. Anyway, because you're kind of bench pressing this whole thing most of the time. Anyway, I'll be back in a few minutes when that's all in. Okay, sorry, this is a little dark. You can see the pin being pulled back into the hole as I'm cranking it in. And this bolt and the upper one are both going to be 80 foot-pounds. When you do this one, you can do the 80 foot-pounds on here. You can torque it on with the 80. The top one, I'll show you how to do that in a second. Anyway, I'll do this one first and then I'll come back. This one can be torqued down first because it mounts straight to the chassis. It's not a ball joint. It's not needing to be under compression to mount. It's not a moving joint, so it doesn't have to have the weight of the suspension on it when this one is torqued. So this bottom one here to the control arm can be, or the steering knuckle, this one can be torqued without having to have weight of the chassis or the vehicle on the joint when you tighten it. So this one we're going to tighten 80 foot-pounds, and then we'll do the other one. I'll show you how to do that back in a sec. Okay, now for the upper bolt, I've taken another jack and put it under the suspension to jack it up and put weight on the ball joint so it's not hanging. So I've jacked from under the ball joint. The jack is under there pushing up on it. Tightened this to 80 foot-pounds as well. And now, I have to take the jack out in order to move it so I can get this upper arm on. So I'll be back in 1 second. I have to lower the jack so it allows this arm to move over and reattach to the upper ball joint. If not, you wouldn't be able to reach this. If you didn't jack it up in this way, you wouldn't be able to reach this upper nut here because the arm would be over and blocking it. So back in a second. Okay, using the other jack again, I've jacked up under the suspension to put to simulate the weight of the suspension being on the car. I'm going to tighten the top bolt here. This one is about 33 foot-pounds. This is not, don't crank this on, you'll strip it. 33 foot-pounds. And then the main bolt that goes across here, that's 50 foot-pounds. Blue thread lock on both. You can use red if you want to use heat to take them off next time. But anyway, use thread locker on them. These have a locking nylon lock nut, but I don't trust those. I use thread locker anyway. And that will be it. Other than that, 33 foot-pounds, 30 to 35, but I'd go in between, dead in between 33. And top one is 48 to 50. 50 is good. A little bit of a bitch to get a torque wrench on that back bolt, but you can do it. It's just a bit of a hassle. A couple extensions involved and stuff. So always torque from the nut side. So on the top one you have to use your torque wrench on the nut side as well. And that's about it. Bolt everything up. Make sure to hook up the wires again in the wire clips that we'd unhooked before, if you unhooked them. And yeah, thanks for watching. And that's 33. So now we just have to go to the top and we'll be all done. Okay, so final tightening on the upper control arm mount was done when the wheel was back on, tire on the ground. Final torque to 50 foot-pounds on that top control arm. Battery back in. When you're putting the battery back in, positive first, get everything hooked up, negative goes on last. Negative comes off first, negative goes on last, always in a Mercedes. And key out of the ignition. Exact same procedure for the driver's side. The only difference being there's your top bolt for the top strut or control arm, the front one, and the rear bolt is behind under that hose. I don't know if you can see the bolt sticking out there, right in front of my finger. See right there? It's got like a long threaded, see that bolt? That's the top one on that side. So much easier to get to on this side. All Mercedes, there's one side that's a bitch to get to. There just is. There's just no room in the engine compartment for stuff. So anyway, it's something you should only do about every 200,000 kilometers, 120, 130,000 miles, if that, depending on how harsh your roads are and stuff and how old your car is. It's time and
Even if the car's got 10,000 miles on it, it's been sitting for years and years and years and doesn't drive much, the suspension's going to be a little bit worn out. If you got really rough roads, same deal. If you drive really hard, same deal. Anyway, thanks for watching. That's about it. Again, if you want the bolt torques, the upper control arm, the main big bolt, that is 50 foot-pounds when the weight of the car is on it. The upper ball joint, 33 foot-pounds with the weight of the suspension pushed up on it. The two lower ball joints are 80 foot-pounds. And that's all she wrote. Just have to torque my wheel lug nuts, and that's it. Thanks for watching. Anybody interested in SLK stuff, hopefully within the next couple of days I'll have something cool. I'm going to be installing a smart top from Mods for Cars. So I'm going to be doing the whole module installation, how to install that, and that basically gives you remote control of your roof. So you press 3 times on your unlock button on your door and your whole roof comes down, windows go down, everything gets ready while you're walking toward the car, and no need to hit that button and hold it there and wait and waste your whole 10 seconds of your life, which is, it's just a neat thing. Anyway, thank you for watching.